Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are on a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Arn with the founder of the Four Horsemen, AA, the enforcer himself, the Hall of Famer, Arn Anderson. Arn, how are you, man?
Hanging in there, buddy. Everything's good. Everything's good. Very fortunate, very lucky. Everybody here is healthy, and I hope everybody out there is healthy as well.
Well, we're excited to be catching up with you today. We're back for another hashtag Ask Arn Anything. A couple things I want to get out of the way right up front. Number one, what's going on with this Cody Open Challenge? It feels like we've got new opponents every single week, and I think our next Dynamite we're going to see might be the biggest opponent yet, right? Brody Lee.
Yeah, buddy. I'm concerned about this one. I've been very high on him for many years. He's a guy that he's so good that you just take for granted he's going to be good, and you kind of overlook him. And man, he's ready to rock and roll. I could tell that. I'm worried about this one, but Cody said open challenge. That's what he meant, and it means open challenge.
Well, I'm excited to see it. I'll never forget, probably, 6 or 7 years ago, you and I were sitting down watching wrestling together here in Huntsville, and you put him on my radar and said, man, this, at the time, Luke Harper is something else. And to now see that match happen on Dynamite, I'm looking forward to it. And I think this whole open challenge thing has really created a lot of fun matches. I really enjoyed the Scorpio Sky match, and the Eddie Kingston thing, man, that just blew me away. And I'm glad to see that he's on the squad now. So a lot of moving and shaking, and even a new belt. You're in a big time segment every week on Dynamite now.
Well, yeah, the new championship's beautiful. A lot of good things have came from the open challenge. Eddie Kingston, although being a big mouth and verbally attacking me, which, hey, I get it. You know, you want to get yourself on the radar, go after some guys. And that's what he did, end up getting him a job. And I'm happy that a guy that talented who was out there and really wasn't on anybody's radar prior to this had something good happen to him. And that's what AEW is all about is providing guys with a chance to show what they got who maybe have not been on TV before. So it's great for the viewer. It's great for the competitors. It's just all around winner.
Well, let's talk about something that we're not going to agree on, because we agree the open challenge has been fun. But I got to tell you, as we're set to record right now, it's just after lunchtime here in Alabama, and I just put away a cheeseburger. And I've decided that me and you need to let the fans be involved in this, because you're on Team Bacon, I'm on Team Cheese, and I think you've lost your ever-loving mind. So we're going to put a poll up over at the Arn Show, and here's the vote. You don't just say, oh, I like bacon better. No. You're going to vote for one, and the loser goes away forever. If you could only have one for the rest of your life on your burger, would it be bacon or would it be cheese? Arn, are you going to reconsider? Or are you still firmly on the bacon side?
Not only that, I'm going to double down, and I'm saying cooked medium.
Well, I think I can get behind that. I like medium.
Okay, yeah, I'm sticking with the bacon.
Okay, well, I got the cheese, and we want to know what you guys think. over at the Arn Show. We'll get a poll pinned to the top, but the rest of this show, man, it's all about you guys. We made a post, I don't know, 3 or 4 days ago, and Arn, we got nearly 500 replies. There's no chance we'll get to all of these. We'll try to do as many as we can. And let's jump right into it. Andy Gresh wants to know, why did every 80s wrestling promo, whether by a manager or a wrestler, have the phrase, "Let me tell you something" in it? It feels like all of them did.
Well, that's a great observation. I would suggest it just became habit, and one guy, kind of like guys doing the same moves and the same holds. They saw someone successful go that route, and maybe even subconsciously, they just figured that was the way you should do it. I never chose to do an interview like anybody else. I just wanted to tell my story and get what I was thinking about and planning on, and pretty much up front, and go from there. But hey, that's very interesting. It's, I think, habit more than anything.
Unapologetic Uncle Coogee wants to know, why do you think the WWE never really did shows in places like North and South Dakota, Montana, Idaho, etc.? There are tons of hungry wrestling fans up this way, and we rarely get any wrestling. Arn, is that just based on population, do you think? I mean, some bean counter somewhere says, hey, there's not enough folks here to support the show.
Partially, and a real reality is the difficulty in getting there. The first day of a loop, say you book somewhere in South Dakota, it'll take you 8 hours of flying with your layovers, depending on where you live. If you live on the East Coast, it'll take you sometimes 7 or 8 hours just to fly there. Then once you work the show, the very next show could be another 7 or 8 hour plane trip, depending on, because as we know, WWE is notorious for skipping around a lot. But I think it's more of a logistics thing, hard to get out there. It probably is based on what the population is. Maybe it's the time of year. If it's springtime, when the weather breaks after being in some of those terrible winters that they suffer through in that part of the country, people are ready to get outside. They necessarily don't want to go to an event that's indoors, probably a number of reasons.
TJ wants to know, what was your reaction to seeing Mick Foley being thrown off the Hell in a Cell cage?
I probably took a gulp and a gasp like everybody else on earth. Never thought I would see something like that. And the margin for error is so small. God was watching over Mick that day. That's all I can tell you, because a foot either way, that could have went way worse. I'm sure it was bad enough if you're living in Mick's body, but man, it set a new bar and pretty much hit the ceiling as far as how far you could go. And man, that's something, if you saw it, you'll never forget it.
Bob wants to know, did you ever lobby for someone to be a part of the Horsemen that the powers that be rejected?
No, not really. There were so many things that went into, once you got past Barry Windham and that group of horsemen, there was so much politics that fell in there on every incarnation after that. And there were decisions being made by different people, and very seldom did the actual guys that were already horsemen have a say in it. It was usually made by the office.
Lots of folks have questions this week about Kamala. Of course, we just recently lost him, and what a legend he was. Woodrow wants to know, did you ever hear or see anything about the Kamala Andre the Giant locker room altercation? Either way, do you have any other interesting Kamala stories?
Well, I have one that concerns me, but I would definitely like to hear the one about Kamala and the Giant.
I think
if that's
I think the gist was, allegedly, according to the rumor and innuendo, they had a bit of a scuffle in the ring, and I think Kamala maybe accidentally was a little too stiff with Andre. Andre started choking him. Kamala got pissed, started to throw some receipts. Eventually, allegedly, Andre said a word he probably shouldn't have said. And Kamala made sure the next time he wrestled him, his wife or girlfriend at the time had sewn a little pocket into his trunks. And he had a little pistol ready for Andre if he tried to pull anything. And of course, nothing ever came of that. They had a man-to-man conversation, and they were friends from then on out. That's magic how that works. But yeah, that's sort of the gist that most people heard about when they read the obituary in the Wrestling Observer last week. I probably didn't do it justice. If you haven't already, go out of your way to read Dave's write-up. I think it's, I'm probably way out of school on this, but I think it's one of the 10 best things I've ever written or read rather that Dave's written. It's just a fascinating story. I'll send you a copy, Arn, but let's hear your story about Kamala.
So, in all my years, 38 to be exact, I never heard a story about a guy bringing a gun to the ring. That's about as heavy as it gets, I guess. And I don't know how that story didn't make it out to everybody that's been in the business ever since, but somehow it evaded me because I never heard about it. My story pales by comparison big time. My first booking in Louisiana for Bill Watts was against Kamala. And for about 5 minutes, I was shown that it was his job to get over and me to get him over. And it was the safest, easiest money I ever got getting slaughtered, but he slaughtered me. And you never forget your first house show in the business, and that was against Kamala. So, I'll never forget it. And so sorry that he passed way too soon.
It's pretty remarkable, the impression that he left on everybody. And I think Meltzer said that he had a reputation for, not only was he intimidating to fans, but being one of the safest sort of night off type performers that one of the boys could have, right?
Yep. And all of his stuff still looked good. That big chop looked like it cut you in half. And, his stuff looked good, but he was very safe. Never dropped anybody on their head bad. He was just a great character, and he had full control of that gimmick, and he got that gimmick over everywhere he went. He drew money.
Yes, he did. Let's talk about a question here from Joe Yu. He wants to know if you can tell us about Peter Miller, the Mongolian Mauler. Says, I know you spent some time with him in WCW back in 93, 94, paired up with Colonel Robert Parker.
I don't recall that guy. What he said his name was?
The Mongolian Mauler.
I guess we'll have to do some research on that because I don't recall that guy.
Talk to us.
Sorry about that.
What about Puerto Rico? Lewis wants to know, did you ever get a chance to compete in Puerto Rico? It would have been quite the opportunity in the 80s, it feels like.
No, I never went to Puerto Rico. Obviously, after the issues with Bruiser Brody, I never really cared to go there. Quite frankly, I had heard the stories about the fans throwing rocks and bottles and batteries and all the issues of going down there prior to that happening. And I was lucky enough to stay booked in some really, really good territories in the States. So I have never had actually anyone try to recruit me to go down there. I was really never available. But I heard it was a beautiful place to work if you were working the territory, living on the beach, obviously.
Brian Drake wants to know, what would it take to make finishers matter again? It used to be a spine buster and that was game over, not 15 kickouts and 15 more spine busters. What can wrestlers do today to create a culture where finishers matter?
Oh boy, if he knew how many times I'd kicked that around in my head as well. There's a lot of things that happen today that are not only very, very dangerous, but are so much better than what the finish ends up being. It's a dilemma that I guess the industry has pretty much caused itself. The more things you do in a match that are really high level, big issue bumps, that look like they kill you, well, they just probably should. Because I'm afraid this group of talent in this era are really beating their bodies up, and I'm really afraid on a daily basis, pretty much, that somebody's going to get really crippled or injured. But it is the evolution of the business. I don't know if we can ever pull it all the way back to where it was. So what we have to do is just make sure we do everything we can do to prepare the talent for whatever they're engaging in, and let them know, okay, there's some serious danger involved in this, but ultimately it's your call. And that's the nature of the business these days.
FL4 Kitty wants to know, if you and Ric Flair were both in your prime today, what other two wrestlers would you pick to round out a modern four horsemen?
Well, I'd have to probably take the Revival, I think.
Yeah, FTR all the way. That was what I was assuming everyone would guess. I mean, it feels like that's sort of a modern day version of you and Tully. So yeah, that's where I would go.
Well, and I'd have to take Cody.
Hmm.
Simply because the guy is driven by becoming the very best performer he can, and against every challenge that there can be. And I haven't seen a guy in a long time that has concentrated on his promos, his work rate, his business sense, the way he treats the fans, the way he treats employees. He's just good for the business all the way around. And anybody that's talked to him will tell you that. And you're going to need that other fourth guy, I would think. And I would think right now, even though what we're facing coming up very soon, it'd be hard to look over Harper.
Yeah. Totally
Brody Lee.
That would be, that'd be quite the group right there.
I think so.
John Myco 78 wants to know, why don't you think we see Broadway matches anymore? Is there not enough endurance by the wrestlers? Is there not enough TV time? Are fans not patient enough? I mean, clearly it's not endurance. I mean, I think these are the best athletes maybe wrestling's ever seen. Is it just, we live in a Twitter society and everybody has a really short attention span and we're all sort of bouncing around now?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Some people will tell you 6 minutes is just right and too long even. I don't agree with that. I think you have to have a story that is built, if not months, possibly even years, and an angle that would accommodate a 60-minute match. It also takes wrestlers that have a working knowledge of holds, how to work a body part, how to actually go out and wrestle, because you cannot bump each other for 60 minutes. I don't think your bodies will hold out. I don't think the fans will stay tuned in to something like that. It takes a very special talent to go 60 minutes. And you really have to have your ducks all in a row. I just don't think that the attention span would accommodate it today. And the strength of the angle probably wouldn't accommodate it today.
Scott Price wants to know, when you traveled abroad, which country did you enjoy visiting the most? And which country did you enjoy visiting the least when you were on a wrestling tour?
Well, Canadians always supported the product big time. Great fans. UK, great fans. And I'm not putting these in order. Australia, great fans. I know the Philippines was a very, very difficult trip to make travel-wise, with the connections that you had to make and the length of the flights and all that. It was extremely tough. Japan, great turnout on the fans as far as drawing good money and their interest and the respect level they had for wrestlers. Sometimes you could run into some issues, in Mexico that, there were some danger issues when you would get something slid underneath your door that said, probably be a good idea to stay in the hotel. Certainly after dark, don't leave unless you don't want to risk the possibility of getting kidnapped, which I thought was pretty stout. That's the ones that come to mind.
Here's a fun question we've never talked about. Big Club Burner account wants to know, does Arn have any memories of working with Paul Heyman in WCW? What would be some of your most favorite stories about Paul in that era?
Paul was gung-ho from the very beginning, and you knew he had done his homework. There's some guys in the business that study everything that is available, whether it be reading the dirt sheets, watching the network, buying old tapes, trading old tapes, watching everything that somebody sitting at home who's a super fan and has taped every television match on earth. There are some guys that collect all of that information so that when you ask them something, they don't go on memory. They have it logged. Cornette was one of those guys that just had a super memory. But Paul Heyman was a guy that did his homework, and I could tell he did his homework because when he was managing us, he was pretty young in the business, but he was polished, and his promos were excellent, and his working knowledge of things that have happened before were excellent. You could just tell the guy had a bright future, and to this day, he still is on top of his history and can cut a promo that matters and will make you listen and do all those things that keep you plugged into the show. And my experience with him is he was gung-ho, and we had a hell of a group there. Probably didn't realize how good the group was, if you really think about it. But you go back and look at some of the names, including him, that might have been one group that could have got pushed and should have got pushed a little further.
No doubt about it to me. I mean, we get questions about the Dangerous Alliance all the time. Something else we get questioned about a lot, and you and I have never talked about it. Zach Easterly wants to know, what did you think when the McMahons took on Shawn Michaels and God at Backlash 2006?
Wow. Some things, even though you know that it's wrestling and you just go, it's just wrestling, sometimes you go too far, and for what you think is going to be entertaining just comes across as just going too far. And that was one of those deals that didn't really make me feel good about the business. It just felt really, really low road. And when you pick and choose when you do the low road stuff, and when it's at the top and it's their idea, it's just entertainment. But if somebody else would have came up with that and the mood wasn't right, boy, you would have really got crucified over it. And I'm not being facetious or no pun intended. It was one of those things that just went a little too far.
Rajiv wants to know, who had a better mustache back in '86, Rick Rude or Tony Schiavone?
Oh, Rude for sure. Tony Schiavone had a head on him like a bastard rat.
I don't even know what that means, and I love it.
I'm not even sure it means anything, but it certainly fits.
It does, totally. Kevin wants to know, who had the worst farts in wrestling? I'm thinking it had to be Big Show or Vader.
No, the Giant. From the noise, the flapping of the buttocks, and just engulfing the room. I'm talking about by the time he got done with his butt cheeks flapping, and I wish I could make that noise, you were already, by the time, if you took off running for the door, if the noise stopped, you were engulfed in the funk. And he had no rival.
to be clear, you're not saying the Giant in WCW. You're saying Andre the Giant, right?
Andre the Giant.
Yeah. Chris Dunn wants to know, how quickly do you think a guy like Kenny Omega would have lost his mind in WWE with the backstage politics that exists there?
Well, I don't know Kenny well enough and what his politics are. Even though I've been there a while now, he kind of takes care of his own stuff. And I've had just casual conversations with him, but I've never had a conversation where we sat down and talked about direction and politics and what does he think is wrong or right about the company or the business at large. We haven't had those conversations. I can see a strong influence of the Japanese style in his performance, and I've started watching more of the Japanese style so that I can kind of understand what's out there that I missed being in a bubble for 20 years, and just see what different influences some of these young guys have. And I see a strong Japanese influence in his work and thought process.
Mayhem wants to know, who do you think spends more hours of the day pissed off, Tully Blanchard or Taz?
Oh, Taz for sure.
Yeah.
Tully finally had a moment on where he showed the true Tully Blanchard, which will be coming to light, and I think everybody will be thrilled to see. But other than that, he's been away from the business so long, and he is cool and calm and doing his thing with his ministry. And now the Tully of old, who knows? But I got a feeling Taz is still grumbling on a daily basis.
Taz is the only guy I know who would wake up and be mad at breakfast. Like, I don't know who has the energy to be mad at bacon for breakfast, but Taz would find a way.
I just hope I'm not one of those guys that happens to walk by him after he just woke up.
Yeah. It's always one of those, you got to just, take the temperature of the room before you start joking around and just see how are we feeling today? You've always heard people say whenever they want to pitch Vince something, they got to make sure it's the right time and the right place and he's in the right mood. I feel like that same thing applies to Taz. You got to make sure he's in the right mood.
Sounds right. I would probably the safest way would be just assume he's not.
Yeah.
And just tiptoe around. And then if it turns out he's in a good mood, you're good. And if not, you
tuck your chin.
You took all the precautions.
And just in case, tuck your chin, just in case, hypothetically.
That's always good advice.
Charlie Thrower wants to know, Mr. Anderson, do you do cheese on your cheesesteak? If so, do you do whiz, American, or provolone, with or without onions? So we got a legit Philly guy here. I mean, surely you're putting cheese on a cheesesteak, right? Come on.
If I have in the past, it would have been Swiss.
Swiss, boy, you're just all over the place.
Once again, my gripe about cheese. Now I eat cheese on dishes, but I don't want the cheese to overwhelm the meat. That is my argument here. And this applies on the Swiss. Swiss is a lot easier blend on the meat than if you're going to get some kind of spicy cheese or Panama Jack or any of that stuff. Would you at least give me that?
Yes, I will. I can't argue that. Instagram, a wrestling historian, writes, before the War Games match started in Greensboro, you and Tully came down the aisle wearing these sweet looking white Horsemen jackets. Who made those for you, and do you still have yours?
Those came from Crockett Promotions. Believe it or not, they made us there was four. There was a red, there was a black, there was a white, and then there was a blue. And that was it. And they didn't make them, which was a huge mistake on their part. They should have marketed them. They should have been for sale to the fans, but they made 4-piece for us, and that was it. And they weren't that durable. There was a couple of them that got gone that I don't know about. There's a couple that I have kept, and those are reserved for my boys, at least for now. And but the white one, I don't know what happened to it. Missing that one. And do you have one?
I do. Yes, sir.
Which color?
Mine's black.
Black. Okay, that's one of the sweet ones. So the blue one's missing. I think I still have a red one, maybe another black one. That's possible. I might have got a second one, but that's it.
A lot of questions here about Fortune in TNA. Did you ever see the Fortune stuff in TNA where it looked like they were trying to create almost like a Horseman-esque stable for Flair to be the mouthpiece for? Did you catch any of that stuff?
Who were the other guys besides Flair and AJ?
Your boy James Storm was in it, and Kazarian, friend of the show, was in it, and Bobby Roode was in it. So it's a lot of guys that you like, but Flair was the mouthpiece for, and they started, wearing suits to the ring and things like that. So it started to feel, and the name was Fortune, so they threw up the 4 because they would spell fortune like like the word 4. So it just feels like they were trying to sort of do like a TNA version of Fortune.
I agree with you 100%. And I'm sure, those were all performers. Those guys that you named, great performers. And that was, as we've said many times before, that was our theory. That was the way we operated, was we wanted to just go out, and no matter which member of the group it was, from a performance standard, we set the night. We set the pace for the evening, and just had the best matches on the card. That was our deal. So I think they would have been trying to recapture that Horseman thing. There was a lot of people, whether they want to admit it or not, the group, with WWE Evolution.
Of course.
That was a Horseman knockoff. And it was all the same theory. Have class, act like you have a loyalty to the other 3 guys, whether you do or not, and dress well, speak well, perform well. It was all things that go back to the Horseman deal. It'll always be situations where you try to recapture that magic. I don't think there can ever be another quote for Horseman, but there can be a group of guys that have the same theory and operating strategy for God knows how many years.
Let's do another question here. And this is one that, is way deep in the woods that me and you've never really broken down. Matt wants to know, is there a particular hold that you'd like to see brought back? And is there a certain wrestler who is right for that particular hold? You think of an old school hold that maybe nobody's using prominently these days?
About sleeper. And I'll tell you why. A sleeper is just a souped up rear naked choke, which is a legitimate finish to an MMA match. If you can sink it in, that's a tap out or a choke out. And for years, because it is a legitimate, the sleeper, if you put the squeeze on it, it will put a guy out. It is a legitimate, it's the same hold as a rear naked choke, except you just start on your feet and work your way down until a guy is out and unconscious. That used to be a great finish. It was a credible finish. You could build drama as to a guy working his way in position to get that on you. There were defenses to it. There were counters to it. It just made for some drama within the match. And anybody that didn't believe that it was a real hold, just have it applied to you one time. And then when you're revived, ask somebody why you pooped in your pants.
Here's another question you and I never discussed. Did you ever have an offer or any serious interest in going to TNA?
I did not. I was secure in where I was and what my job was, and not being able to wrestle anymore. There was no one that contacted me that quote tried to distill me or get me to move over. I think they realized I was pretty secure in where I was. But I did watch them from time to time because it just made sense. They were the new kid on the block, and I wanted to see what they were doing well and what they were not doing so well. So we could take their mistakes or their victories and steal them, or be sure we didn't do what they were doing if it wasn't something good.
Dan has a good question. He says, when Rick left for the WWF back in 92, it's actually 91, Hogan talked in Flair's 30 for 30 about the impact of quote unquote trickle down economics and how it hurt WCW. Was it that bad? And how much of a boost was it when you got him back? It is an interesting thing that we've never really talked about. Did you notice a sizable difference in the company's momentum or house show attendance or gates or anything like that when Flair went north?
Well, I'm pretty sure you can't replace a Ric Flair. I'm not sure what the house show numbers were, but the main thing is when it was clear that he was gone and went to the competitor, to this day, the one thing, whether he's in the building or not in the building or works for the company or doesn't work for the company, you still have countless people an hour before showtime wooing. And when he has went to the other company, but everybody in your audience is doing the woo too, it pretty much tells you that you probably should have kept that guy underneath your banner and not the competition. Now, direct numbers, I couldn't tell you what the quarter hour numbers, I'm sure with Flair versus not Flair, were probably told you most of the story. But yeah, it had to hurt the company, I'm sure.
Talk to me a little bit about clumsiness. Big Extra wants to know, hey, Arn, who is the clumsiest wrestler you have ever wrestled? Has anyone ever hurt you because they were careless or clumsy? As a fan, Lex Luger comes to mind as someone who may be called clumsy, but I was never in there. What say you?
No, it's going to have to be George Elegante.
Yeah.
He was very clumsy, and he was extremely large and extremely stiff. And I've told the story before, and we can tell it again here.
Please do.
We were in a 6-man, and it was Rick, myself, and I think Barry Windham, and it was Pillman and Elegante, and I can't quite remember who the third babyface was, but we were somewhere like Baltimore. I think it was Baltimore, and Rick got in with Elegante and was doing his thing, and I guess he ducked under and went behind and chopped him hard in the back, which we didn't know at the time, I guess hurt him. Flair then used the brilliance of coming over and tagging me, and me stepping through the ropes with a pissed off 8-footer. So what he proceeded to do is, I'm sitting there figuring out what I'm going to do, is he just turned around and he just clotheslined my head off. Hit me about chin level, and man, did he light me up. So once I came to, and once the match had finished, I was pissed. I come in the locker room, I go, Elegante, what the hell was that all about? For God's sakes. What? That friggin' clothesline. Rick hurt me. Well, clothesline Rick, you stupid son of a bitch, not me. And that's kind of how that went down. That was the, you don't clothesline anybody in the chin. That's clumsy. That's real clumsy and reckless. And that's probably the worst I got hurt by a guy just being eat up with the dumbass.
Eat up with the dumbass. Let's talk about grilling. Mike wants to know, are you a gas grill guy like JR? Do you use charcoal like Conrad? Do you prefer smoking like Eric? Nobody knows what Tony is. What is Arn? Gas, charcoal, smoke? What's he into?
Well, I know what your argument's going to be. Charcoal. obviously for the flavor and those things. I do gas just because it's cleaner and neater and burns faster and it's easier in and out. And as you know, we don't have a lot of time. So anytime we can cut down and less cleanup, that's what I'm for. So I do the gas grill. Weber would be my brand.
Big Extra says, I'm a big fan of Adam Page. I think the sky's the limit for him. He reminds me a lot of Barry Windham from the Crockett days. What are your thoughts on the Hangman, and does he remind you at all of Barry as well?
You know what? Come to think of it, he does. And I think he's very, very talented too. And I think here's one of the really smart things that's occurring is he is getting over and he's being pushed not like a rocket straight up, but a little bit on an angle so that he goes up one week and then he may go up a little bit the next week, and then he may flat line across and stay where he's at position wise, but he's not being shoved too hard where you spit him out, and he's not dragging. He's not dragging his feet. He's one of those guys that every time he's on TV, you're glad to see him because you know he has talent, and he really does have talent. And he mixes just enough of old school and just good solid wrestling with some of the flips over the top and some of the flash and some of that stuff. There's a nice blend with him. He doesn't lean too far old school or he doesn't lean too far new school. And I think that guy's got a very bright future.
No doubt about it. This is a pretty controversial question here. Let's see how you feel about it. Pender J says, what is your opinion of the leg slap every time a punch or kick is done? And why doesn't the younger talent listen when more experienced people in the business tell them to stop? Pender J is asking this because I think Jim Ross has made it his personal mission to eradicate the leg slap. And I heard Fit Finley joke once that this generation of wrestlers will have cauliflower thighs. Where do you land on the leg slap?
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessary. It is absolutely not necessary. And if you make solid contact, you're going to have your noise. And just to try to concentrate on creating noise instead of contact, it's a mistake. You know, one good solid kick, no matter where it is, if it's flush, you get it. It landed. And the smacking on the leg is just one of those things that it gets very easy to spot. I would suggest if they could do it like Bobby Eaton, who smacked his shoulder when he threw a punch, but you can go back and pull any piece of videotape you want. You'll never see it. You will never, ever bust him on him doing that. But on a punch, he would crack himself in the shoulder, but you never noticed. That's being able to pull off some of the magic of our industry and the magic that keeps you wondering, okay, did he crack him or did he not crack him? Do they like each other? Do they not? Is making it done well and not being able to see through it. That's the difference.
This is an interesting question. Ken wants to know who sold the Spine Buster the best. And Lord, you delivered a lot over the years. Can you narrow it down to your favorite sell of a Spine Buster?
Probably not. The second I name someone, I will see a compilation that someone has posted on our website or somewhere where it's 4 or 5 guys taking a Spine Buster. And it was just, I want to say a couple of weeks back, there was a kid that was just there to do TV, was there to get me over, that took a Spine Buster, and man, did he sell it as good as anybody I've ever seen. When he landed, he just kind of arched up and rolled to the side, and he just made it look painful. So there are a lot of guys that have been kind enough to get that thing over for me over the years, He was one of them. I can't remember his name or if his name was even listed, but he did a great job. Um, no one stands out over the other. Everyone was very generous and making that thing look good. Most everybody.
Antonio Santos wants to know, how do you think Ray's son Dominic will do in his in-ring debut at SummerSlam this weekend against Seth Rollins?
I think Seth Rollins is good enough that he can have a match with a guy. It doesn't matter how green he is or how new he is or any of those things. Seth Rollins is a technician. He is a professional. He will figure out a way to make whatever he does credible. And I hope Dominic, goes out and just without getting nervous, and which he's going to be, but it's a big venue. As far as SummerSlam itself, doesn't matter the people that are there. It's just a big show, and there's going to be pressure. But I just hope that he relaxes enough and lets Seth just sail the ship, and I hope it turns out well for him.
Here's an interesting question about Magnum TA. This one comes to us from Michael Eldridge, who always brings pretty good questions to the show. Does Arn think Magnum TA would have been the NWA's version of Hulk Hogan had he not been injured, or would he have just been a short-term champion till Rick got the title back?
I think the sky's the limit with Magnum because he hadn't been working that long when he got hurt. He was still getting better. He was still improving. He was still learning the business, and he had a very unique look. His work rate was coming along, handsome guy. He did a promo. Now you're talking about credible promos. When he would do a promo, you believed him. He was one of those baby faces that he wasn't going to tell you anything was going to happen unless it was going to happen. He wouldn't guarantee something and then fall short. And he had that fire in his eyes that baby faces have to have if they're going to be top draws. You have to believe what they say is going down is going down. He would have been a better performer than Hogan. As to someone to compare him to, I'm not really sure. I would compare him. Oh gosh, I don't even know. I don't even know the right one to compare him to. But he had a bright future ahead of him, man. He was just getting started, and God knows. I know Jim Crockett and the world lost a superstar that day. That's for sure.
Here's a more modern question for you. What are your thoughts on Raw Underground? Have you had a chance to see that?
I saw about a minute of it to figure out what it was and immediately cut the channel off.
Not a fan?
Not a fan.
What don't you like about it?
I just think it's grasping at straws. It's, we are a wrestling product. Anytime we vary from being a wrestling product, it is always less than. And to have guys just filing out there and having, would-be knockouts or would-be chokeouts in a minute or whatever it would be and just move to the next one, it just feels like throwing stuff up against the wall to see if it'll stick. And it's not what we do. And anytime you try to get away and go another direction, I think you're making a mistake.
Sidney Davis wants to know, on the January 15th, 96 episode of Nitro, the Dungeon of Doom and the Horsemen face off in an interview with Mean Gene in the ring. After Pillman speaks out of turn, you slap him with perhaps the hardest slap I've ever seen. Was that a Marty Lundy style slap?
You bet it was. And it was the only thing that Pillman at that time would have understood. We didn't know what Pillman was doing. one way or the other half the time. And now if we didn't know, which direction he was heading and where was he working or was he shooting, we didn't know. Nobody knew. And that, he was off the deep end. And to interrupt a promo that had a message that had to be put out there, period, to interrupt that, it might have been a little stiffer than it should have been, but it got his attention, and that was the intention. Yes, that was a Marty Lundy slap.
Missy McDonald wants to know, do you think there will ever be a referee section of the Hall of Fame? If not, why not? I feel like they're a vital part of telling a good story, and we don't ever see them get their just due being put in the hall.
Agreed. Why you would put entertainers that have been on Raw one time for maybe 8-10 minutes and put them in the Hall of Fame ahead of some of our officials, that were great referees, or furthermore, to put them in the Hall of Fame ahead of some of the talent that's not in theirs is ridiculous. It's, an official is the third guy in the ring if it's a single match. And if he's doing his job, he's basically invisible until the point comes that he needs to insert himself. And he steps in and makes a difference, and he lends some credibility, to the match. He reminds people there are some rules. Otherwise, what would stop on any given match the bell ringing and just a guy sliding out, getting a chair and sliding back in, and if there's no rules, end it right there. Beat a guy half to death with a chair. Officials have to have a presence, and they have to have some authority. And if they don't, it's just pitch up and smear, and you can't have that.
Let's switch gears and do a sort of a weird question here. I don't think I've ever seen it phrased like this. Mike wants to know, does Arn think Vince McMahon gets personal enjoyment going against or screwing over wrestling fans who consume his product?
Next question.
All righty. Here's one from Mike, another Mike. We got lots of Mikes. Double A, do you have any George South stories to share?
George was a guy that when you went to Atlanta TV or our television for Jim Crockett Promotions, if you saw George South's name again on the other side of yours as an opponent, you were absolutely thrilled, because George was a polished performer. He was a businessman. He was a professional, very skilled. And he was like having a veteran in there. The guy knew his job, did his job well, and you could really go out and have a good, solid match with George. And the guys that didn't just missed the boat, because he would enhance any match that he was in. And to this day, it's probably the exact same thing.
A couple more questions here, and then we'll wrap things up. Eldridge wants to know, were there any territories that Arn wished he could have wrestled in and ones he was glad he didn't? For example, the AWA or Memphis?
The only one I missed, I think the couple I missed would have probably been the Florida territory, just because the guys had so much fun. I mean, if you're living in Tampa and staying on the beach and driving back and forth to just the Florida towns, my God, how great is that? Also, if you go out to the Oregon territory, everyone compared it to the Pensacola territory, which I did get 14 months in, and I had the greatest time of my life. It was like 800 miles or something, Portland, driving per week, which was nothing, short trips, pretty area, probably too much rain, but I'm sure they didn't notice that. And just, the guys that owned it, were great guys to work for. They were fair payoff guys. There's not really one that I would say that I just flat didn't want to go to for whatever reasons. In those days, it was just, some territories would be on fire. I didn't really want to go to the Kansas City territory because the timing was bad and business was not good. Um, you wanted to go into the territory that you got word from the grapevine, hey, this place is fixing to pop. You might want to get a spot in there if they want you because they're starting to collect talent. And, that would make it through the grapevine.
Let's do a question from Brett with 1T. He says, what are your thoughts on Finn Balor? I felt like he came in with a strong push to begin with, but then it died off once he got hurt.
Yeah, just bad timing for Finn. His first big match, Seth Rollins, right? He got hurt.
Yep.
Timing was terrible. I mean, they went out and had a very good match and he got hurt. And once you get hurt and then you have to start over again and start your build and all those things. And it's just hard to start over. And I think he has a lot of talent. He's unique, does a lot of good stuff. But I just think he ran into that issue of getting hurt right away. And that's kind of stalled his career probably.
Here's an interesting question. It's going to get the internet abuzz. Joe wants to know, what's your take on Enzo and Cass? Those dudes might have been the most over talent to come from NXT, and it feels like they were gone within 2 years.
Well, that's fine to be, over at NXT at that time. There was no NXT television show, I don't believe yet, was there?
No, but they were over on the main roster. They were selling merch and the crowd was responding. And then, I mean, the narrative online has been, it was sort of their dealing with this fame or celebrity or outside of the ring, amongst the locker room or in real life. That was the issue, not necessarily them connecting with the crowd, or at least that's the rap online, but I wasn't there. What the hell do I know? What happened? Why don't you think they are still with WWE and selling a bunch of merch and doing their thing?
Well, I mean, that's fine. But when you come up to the main roster, now you're starting to have, your own TV now. Now, the ones that are, Conrad, you can take 200 people in a crowd of 10,000, and if they choose to be heard, they sound very loud. I'm talking fans scattered around the arena. If they're chanting the same thing, 200 people can make a lot of noise, and they really can. And the fact is, they did have that following. They came up to the main roster. They had a match or two, and the people were getting with the promos and getting with all the things. But the second they put Cass in the program with Big Show, he quit listening. Oh, and I know because I was the producer of that match. And here's the Giant willing to put this guy over, and he was fighting us every step of the way. Same thing, I had Enzo, and I had him in some 205 matches on house shows, and he was just doing every stupid thing you could do to make a babyface look foolish. And it was some of the lucha guys that he was working with, and they didn't know the difference until I started pointing it out to them. And I think the fact that you don't take the guidance from the people, the producers there that are there to help you and know a little bit better than you do what's going to get over and what's not, when you quit listening and you just decide you're a bigger star than they are a assist to your success, and you're going to do it your way, that's when you get started heading downhill. And they made some mistakes, and it didn't take very, very long before they had heat in the locker room. And then they started to fall apart out in the ring as far as production, and then they started to get heat with the office. And that's what happened. They self-destructed.
Let's do one more. We'll do two more, then we'll wrap it up. John wants to know, what are your thoughts on Rip Rogers? Do you like him, dislike him? Any good stories about him? We've always heard as fans, he's one of the best trainers around.
Yeah, I like Rip. Rip was a very knowledgeable guy. He was in Pensacola for that part of that 14 months I was there. He was a very good performer. He was great with working with young guys. Uh, he had his valet was Fleabag, which was his wife Brenda, and they were a great team. They had a great gimmick, and Rep has always been able to communicate with young talent and teach them. And anybody that's been trained by Rip has nothing but good things to say about him. And that's how I kind of judge Rip Rogers, is how do his students feel about him? And a lot of good guys have been trained by him, and they have nothing but positive things to say. So I'm sure they're probably right on.
Chico Maivia wants to know, what's the best joke a wrestler ever told you, and who's the funniest horseman? I'm sure he means besides yourself. We'll start with that one first. Who's the funniest horseman besides yourself?
In a dry sense, and you have to realize and be paying attention, he's got a joke. Dean Malenko's hilarious,
Yeah, I agree.
but as dry as you can possibly be. So you have to pay attention what he's saying to realize he just fired a joke off. What was the other part of the question?
What's the best joke a wrestler ever told you?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
Well, let me go first while you think of one. Years ago, I heard, this is not an original joke, but to hear Ricky Morton deliver it, it tickled me. He said that for Valentine's Day, he got his lady of many, many years flowers, and he brought home flowers after a long day at the school or whatever. And she said, "Oh, roses. I guess you want me to spread my legs, huh?" And Ricky said, "Well, honey, I was thinking we'd use a vase."
Okay.
All right, now your turn.
You didn't think I was going to bite on that, did you?
I knew you weren't going to sell it with a laugh, but I'm going to laugh for both of us because that shit tickled me. You got to appreciate Ricky Morton delivering it. It's fucking hysterical.
Let me put it this way. I just had the pleasure of being around Ricky and Robert, and they are still telling the same jokes. Now, this is not, you take it for what it's worth, okay? And that same joke was played on me, if you look at it that way, probably the first month that I knew those guys. We're backstage. Robert walks up. He looks behind me. He goes, "Those new shorts?" And I got on my khaki Bermuda shorts. I went, "No." He says, "Well, tag's still on them." "Well, that's just to get you to turn around and to see that your tag's out." And it's not. It never has been. It's his joke. He told that same joke 30 years later. And apparently he's going around and Ricky telling the same jokes in the locker room that they were telling 30 years ago.
And they're still funny, by the way. Like a few years ago, they were like working a show not too far. So they decided to stop by and hang out and have a few beers after the show. And as soon as Ricky gets downstairs, he says, "Your neighbor got a dog?" And I said, "Yes, sir." "Did he give you any trouble?" And he said, "No, it was, he's laying out there in your front yard licking himself." And I said, "Man, I wish I could do that." And Robert said, "That dog will bite the shit out of you." And I don't know why, but just,
Now that's funny.
I know they're corny, but man, when the Rock and Roll Express deliver them, it's better than a double drop kick. It's just, they're a comedy show and nobody really knows it. Well, I mean, you do, but they don't put that out there for everybody, but good Lord, they're hilarious.
That's funny. I'll take that.
Well, that's going to bring us to a close today. We're really excited that you guys decided to drop in, see how we're doing. We hope you're doing just as great. Next week, we're going to be back with you talking a little more modern WWE. This time it's going to be SummerSlam 2015. You want to talk about recent? This is going to be a good show. We've already got our notes. We're prepped. We're ready for you. And by the way, you can get all these shows early and ad free over at adfreeshows.com. But don't you dare miss next week. On top, it's Undertaker and Brock Lesnar. We've also got Kevin Owens working with Cesaro, easy for me to say, Seth Rollins working with John Cena, and so much more. We're talking SummerSlam 2015 next week here on Arn. Please follow us on Twitter if you haven't already. You can ask your questions every other week to Arn. It's at the Arn Show. And don't forget to watch Dynamite this Saturday. I know you're used to watching it on Wednesday, but Arn, you guys are going to be doing your thing on Saturday this week.
Yeah, it's going to be a hell of a show. And as soon as basketball's done, we're going to head right into it, head first.
We've got a special little promotion that we're doing as well. It's a question of the week. It's brought to you by AEW Unrivaled. If you haven't already, you need to make your way out to your local Walmart. They've got the new wrestling ring set up. Then they've also got a scale ring, plus a ton of new figures, including Cody Rhodes, Brandy Rhodes, of course, Kenny Omega, Chris Jericho, the Young Bucks, and even a replica title belt. You don't want to miss this. Walmart's got them. If you check your Walmart and it's sold out, go to ringsidecollectibles.com and you can pick it up there. And we've actually got a little prize pack for you here. And we want you to follow us on Twitter and go ahead and give us your answer. And it's real simple. We want to know who the first AEW champion was. So hopefully you've been watching Arn and you know who the first TNT champion is, but who was the first AEW world champion? Go follow us at the Arn Show and stay tuned. We're going to give somebody some cool swag next week. Thanks to our friends over at Jazzwares, who have made a tremendous job out of this series 1 of these unrivaled figures. Everybody who is a figure fan is putting these things over. Check your local Walmart and be sure to pick them up at ringsidecollectibles.com if your Walmart is sold out. And Arn, these are such hot sellers. I've seen fans over the weekend start posting where certain Walmarts are saying you're only allowed to buy 2 AEW toys because they want to make sure that everybody's got enough to go around. These things are selling like hotcakes, my man.
Well, yeah, first round, right? It's the first time they've been available.
Yeah.
And that's cool. We got a lot of fans out there, and we're building every week. We're building our fan base, and they want to get those things first. You want to be the first one to get one.
So run down to your Walmart, keep checking back every day. And don't forget, you can pick them up at ringsidecollectibles.com, but be sure to take a look at the Arn Show on Twitter. We're going to have a question posted there, and we just asked it to you here. Who was the first AEW champion? And we're going to have a prize pack for you here next week. And, of course, next week, it's all about SummerSlam 2015. It's happening every Tuesday, and you know what that means. It's Arn!
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at savewithconrad.com.